Hey everybody, Curtis Bryan here. Friday afternoon, we're going to jump into the Tuscany Ranch vote on Tuesday. For those of you guys that did not watch the BOCC meeting, it went from about 5:01 p.m. until about midnight, just before midnight it closed. So we're going to jump in today on this video, jump into what the Tuscany Vote ended up doing, what they changed, all of those things about the Tuscany Vote so that you can know exactly what is going into this agreement because it was chaos. So let's go. All right, so what did Citrus County get from this Tuscany project? So as you all are aware, Tuscany Ranch came before the board. It's a multi-thousand unit development, so housing and all those things. Probably the biggest one that we've had in decades, and probably the biggest one that we'll have in a very, very long time. So big decisions for the board, big project, so let's jump into it and see exactly what happened, what took place that Tuesday night. So first thing we're going to do is walk through the timeline of what Tuscany came through and how it became the process. December 23, it came to the PDC. March 24, 7, 2024, the PDC meeting was canceled. So that first meeting, they asked for a continuance because it was clear that they weren't going to get approval. They brought it back again. It was canceled. They pushed it back. September 10th, 2024, they came to the BOCC with the development agreement, saying that they wanted to create this development agreement to dictate how they're going to build this project out going forward. BOCC allowed them to submit a development agreement for this project. February 20, 2025, it went to the PDC where they also asked for a continuance. April 17th, 2025, to the PDC. That's where they got the approval for the project. It was 7-0, I believe, was the final vote. And then July 8th on Tuesday, we saw it come back to the BOCC for the final approval, and that was a 3-2 vote to approve the project. All right, so we're going to talk about quasi-judicial. We'll kind of touch on this. I'll do a whole entire video on quasi-judicial because it's confusing for a lot of people. But basically, the quasi-judicial process is a process in which the meeting takes place. So it walks through the different parts of the meeting. It dictates how the meeting takes place, dictates time, and all those things. The things we're going to look at for this portion of it is we're going to talk about time limits. So the applicant gets up to 30 minutes to make the presentation. That's the slide shows all of those things. Staff also gets up to 30 minutes to make their presentation. Parties in opposition. So occasionally there's a party that comes and says, we're opposed to this project, and then they get the 30 minutes as well. Tuscany did not have one because they changed some of the things and the party in opposition backed out. Participants, these are members of the public, and they're allowed up to 3 minutes to speak on this as well. Once all of that happens, it goes to rebuttal, which means the applicant gets up and they're able to get 15 minutes to rebut what the public said. So if the public said, we don't like this project because of sinkholes or whatever it is, the applicant can get up and say, hey, the sinkhole doesn't matter because of this. And so they can rebut what the public said to further enhance their case. But important is that they can't give additional testimony, which means that they can't provide additional evidence or they can't talk about something that hasn't been talked about already. So they can't provide new details. Same thing, the final argument. So after that rebuttal, they're allowed 5 minutes to wrap up the project, talk about the overall things of what they've talked about. But again, they can't introduce more evidence and they can't bring up new items that haven't been talked about. And then number 7 here is that a speaker can't give his or her time away. So if 30 minutes is there, they can't do it. At the discretion of the chair, the allowable time for any testimony may be extended. This is up to 30 minutes. If additional time is given to the applicant by the chair, an equal amount of additional time given to the parties in opposition. So the testimony is the applicant's process of the presentation. It is not rebuttal. It is not the final argument. So the chair can say, hey, this is a big project. We need more than 30 minutes. Put that out there for you guys. Order the proceeding. So this talks about how the proceeding takes place. Basically, it goes applicant, and then it goes staff, and then it goes the intervener if there is one, and then it goes open to the public and those other things. But Section K of this ordinance here, in the interest of fairness and due process, the chair may choose to allow further responses from the applicant, staff, and/or parties in opposition, but the responses must be limited to issues addressed by the previous speaker. No issues may be raised. So this is if there is questions and things like that later on after the presentation that they're allowed to give further time for that. But again, they can't do new issues. They can't talk about new things that haven't been talked about. The board shall at the end, so once all of that is done, This process here, the board shall publicly deliberate on the matter. No further presentations or testimony shall be permitted, and commissioners shall not further ask questions of persons presenting testimony. This board shall discuss the evidence at which was presented at the hearing and vote on the matter. So this is at the end of the meeting. So after all the presentations are done, after the open to the public, after the rebuttal portion of it, everything closes down. And that means that they can't ask any more questions. They can't talk about new evidence, none of those things. It's board discussion, and then they can go back and forth with each other. Now, this particular meeting, these are the timings of when things took place. So the applicant started, if you go to the YouTube video, and these are times on the YouTube video, the application presentation started about 5:01 p.m. It was a time certain at the BOCC meeting. So go to YouTube, pull up the Citrus County government YouTube page. On there is the video for this application. And the other in the regular BOCC meeting before that. About 4 hours, 25-minute mark into the meeting is when this application was started. They took their first and only break at 7 hours, 45 minutes. They resumed the break at 8 hours, 4 minutes. Staff started their presentation at 8 hours, 6 minutes. Open to the public begins at 8 hours, 57 minutes. The applicant's rebuttal period begins at 9 hours, 15 minutes, which is after open to the public. And then the final vote was about 10 hours, 56 minutes. Now, I broke down the times and how long each of those categories went on. So if we go back to the timing, remember that the applicant gets 30 minutes, staff gets 30 minutes, unless the chairperson allows extra time. And then after that, it goes into the open to the public. Each person gets 3 minutes. It goes into the rebuttal, which is 15 minutes total. And that's, again, to rebut only the information that the people, the open to the public brought in. No new evidence, no new testimony, no new questions, none of those things. And then the closing period after that is 5 minutes. So applicant presentation took 3 hours and 20 minutes. Again, the chair is allowed to do that. I talked to a commissioner. They said that there's no way that they could do this in 30 minutes because they had too many questions and all of that. So that's fair point. It's a big, huge project, thousands and thousands of homes. Why try to cram that into a 30-minute presentation? So I'm fine with that. 3 hours, 20 minutes allows them to ask questions, allows them to dive into the project to get a better handle of what exactly it is. There's no intervener there, so you don't have to give the other person 3 hours, 20 minutes. Let's dive into it. Let's give the full presentation. Let the board get educated on that. They took a 20-minute break. No big deal. Everyone has to stretch their legs, get some food, get something to drink, things like that. Staff presentation took 51 minutes. Again, that was under their, over their 30-minute time period, but under the 3 hours that they would have been allocated because of equal timeshare. Staff never ever takes as long as the applicant generally in these cases. Open to the public, there was about 6 or 7 speakers. It took about 21 minutes of the video. But this is where I start having the issue. The applicant rebuttal and the closing period. So again, the applicant rebuttal means that they can rebut what the open to the public says. So if someone at the open to the public, again, says, we don't like this because of the sinkhole that's there, and they're counting sinkhole as recreation space. And I think someone said this at the meeting. How is a sinkhole recreation space? How can they calculate that into the recreation acreage? So the applicant can be like, well, we're including that because of this reason. So they're allowed to address things that the public said and then shape their, answer those questions and kind of help the board out with some of those things. However, what we saw here is we saw the applicant, I'll show you guys a video here in a second, basically tell the board, hey, if it's okay with you guys, we want to present our terms. We're going to negotiate terms with you guys live as on the fly as this happens, and we want to use that during our rebuttal period. So let's take a look at that.
And public comment, and then we'll come back for rebuttal, unless the board has any questions of us before we rest.
Chair, I'm sorry. So, rebuttal is just limited to rebutting what the public says, not what staff says. Just reminding
I love your
everyone.
quasi-judicial ordinance. Yes.
He actually does.
I do. We've talked about it. Well, could the board elect, if they made a vote to do so, to reconsider or reopen, well, to permit an applicant to address matters before the board after public comment, or I'm thinking on the fly. I tell you what, Mr. Goyani is not in the room right now, and I don't have, well, let me put it this way. I'm not gonna have substantive arguments except for potential conditions of approval or modifications to the agreement to present after during rebuttal. And so I'm not presenting additional argument. I would just be offering up additional conditions or modifications, which would be in response to what we've heard so far and public comment. So I don't think that's additional argument, right? Can we agree?
It's up to the chair.
I agree.
All right, get this show on the road.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so interesting exchange there. That was at the end of the applicant's time period, the first time period where they had the 3 hours, 20 minutes, I believe it was. So he was saying that he wanted to get back up and after the opening of the public, after the staff went and discuss the project further, but he wanted to present the conditions and changes to the development agreement that he was putting together there at the meeting. So he's like, hey, so my next set, I want to get up there. His argument was that it wasn't a substantial argument. It wasn't presenting new evidence, things of that nature, which it was. But that was his argument. He's like, hey, can you get to agree? Importantly, our county attorney did not necessarily agree. She deferred to the chair. The chair allowed that to happen. So they're pretty much violating their ordinance at that particular moment because I don't see anywhere in the ordinance that allows them to add new testimony and add negotiation and all of this. So we'll keep going along with this.
No public comment.
To give you guys an oversight, this is the original development agreement map from the 1981 agreement. Some things here to note is that they had these different things were indicated for specific purposes. So for instance, these were single-family cluster houses in this area here, single-family detached cluster and attached houses. So the original development agreement indicated where these different things were going into the project. Sorry, this was the original one. Sorry, I'm backwards. So this shows you single-family cluster, single-family detached, single-family attached, which are like townhouses, things like that. Cluster houses closer together. These are single-family houses, things like that. Going back to that original map here. This is what they were discussing at the meeting, so just a bunch of yellow areas here. So that's going to become important here in minutes. So at the Tuscany hearing, we hear often, why they approve all these houses, why they approve, thousands of houses. We can't handle it, the roads can't handle it, all those things. I get it. But we have to remember that they were allowed to do this by right. So property owners have rights to their property to develop it in the manner in which they purchased it. Meaning if you buy a 1 acre piece of property, it allows you to have 4 houses per acre. You can put 4 houses on that 1 acre piece of land. That is your right to do as a property owner. Now, if you buy that piece of property and let's say it's only 1 acre or 1 unit per acre, so 1 house per acre, you can't put 4 houses on there unless you go to the BOCC to ask for that approval, and then they can vote on it, yes or no, whatever they want to do with that. So we have to keep in mind that Tuscany has rights to the development of that property. So without the BOCC approval, if they were just to build out their property without going to the board, this is what they were allowed to do by right. They could do 3687 single-family units. They could do 1,415 multifamily units. The impervious surface ratio, which is the amount of concrete on the ground, impenetrable surface for water, is around 50%. So 50% of the ground can be concrete, 50% has to be like natural grass, sand, things like that. They're also importantly allowed to build a golf course or a lagoon on those property types that they have there. Those have to go under the commercial elements for that. So without any approval from the BOCC, they can go in there and put in thousands of homes. There was no way to stop homes because that was their property right to do that. Now, important to note, there's a little asterisk here. They have to follow the LDC. So LDC has different guidelines for setbacks. How far the buffers, or how long the buffers have to be, how wide the buffers have to be between houses, how far away from a road the house has to be, things like that, lot lines. So the LDC determines the way that construction works. So just because they're allowed 3687 family units, we heard Joanna say during the meeting, they're probably not able to get to that number with the LDC. So they would have to ask for variances, or they have to come to the board, or they could build less houses if they didn't want to come to the board. So they're coming to the board with this project, not because they're allowed to build those properties, but because they're asking for variances and changes to the development DRI that was there initially, so that requires the BOCC approval. So required in the original DRI, which is a development regional impact, this is what was required into their agreement of the land that they purchased. So back in the 80s, 70s, 80s, they developed Beverly Hills. They put in a bunch of different things that are required for these build-outs for different pieces. And so for this particular parcel, they were required to put in a 2-bay fire station after the 3,000th unit was built. That's not for their project for 3,000 units. It's the overall DRI. So currently there's 2,413 houses already built. So in about 600 units, they would have to put in a 2-bay fire station. They would have to put in turn lanes based on the commercial build out. So as they're adding commercial elements, increasing square footage that's built, they have to do traffic studies and things of that nature. And so as required, they would have to put in turn lanes and different things. And so that's in the original DRI. They would have to put in a signal at Hampshire and 491 at some point in time. So that was coming anyway. Importantly, they have to provide one lane of paved road on 491 with a 30-foot right-of-way dedication with no impact fee credits, meaning that in front of their project, it's 1.4 miles wide. They would have to dedicate 30 feet of right-of-way, and they would have to pay to build one lane of highway for that. And then they would also have to provide fill dirt for the 491 project. I didn't see how long that would go, so who knows how how far that has to go for it. Just says 491 project. That could be argued all the way down to 200, or it could be argued to just in when they're 1.4 miles. But they would have to provide fill dirt for that, and they would have 147 acres of recreational space in that build out. So they would have to include that in there. So what did they change? So during the meeting, we heard a lot of different changes. They presented this in the development agreement of different things they were going to be able to change. They negotiated some of it on the fly, and we'll get into that in a minute. But what they changed mostly, and these are like the drastic changes, they changed some smaller things that didn't really matter as much. But the drastic changes means that they allow the use of duplex, triplex, and quadplex, which is the county considers multifamily housing. The DRI does not. DRI defines these as single-family housing, but for the county, they're considered multifamily housing. In any of the designated single-family housing areas, flexibility to move the products wherever they want them put. So we saw all those yellow colors. Let me go back and show you those real quick so we can all be on the same page. So all of this yellow, what they're asking permission for is to put whatever they want to, wherever they want to in this yellow. So if they want a duplex, triplex, quadplex, whatever, next to a single-family house, that is fine. If they want it, 3 or 4 of those, and then 1 or 2 single-family houses around it, that is fine. If they want to do a whole cluster of, multifamily, they could do that as well. So they wanted flexibility to put any of those products in any of these locations without designating certain spots for that. Now, this is a drastic change to the DRI because the DRI had those areas subset to allow them to put those only in certain areas. So it kind of dictated where things went to, but they want the flexibility to do it wherever they want to. Argument there was that 20 years from now, the market's going to change. They may not want some certain products. So that's why they want the flexibility for that. But it creates an unknown with the county. And we heard the commissioner say this, like, we don't know where anything's going to go. It's just a blank slate. They can put whatever wherever they want to. So it doesn't make sense to put a 20, 30 foot wide building next to a single family house. How's that going to look? So valid questions there, but they're not bound by plats or anything like that with this PUD system that they did. They also wanted to increase the heights from 1 story to 4 stories for apartments, and this is in the multifamily 1 and multifamily 4 sections. And they wanted to increase the height from 1 story to 2 stories in the multifamily 2 to multifamily 3. Now, this is important because the DRI does not allow anything taller than a 1-story building. So if they were to do multifamily housing in those sections, they would have to do duplex, triplex, apartment, rows of apartments or what have you in those areas. They weren't allowed to do multiple stories. So this changes drastically the DRI and changes drastically what's allowed there to allow them to put more apartment units that they may not have been able to get otherwise. Now, with these things, it also increases density. So the density increases they ask for here is the going from 10 units per acre to 20 units per acre, the multifamily areas, but the total 10 units per acre throughout all multifamily. So basically what they're wanting to do is in multifamily 1, multifamily 4, they want to go up to 10 units per acre. That allows them to do the 4-story apartment buildings. But the overall acreage, they can only do an average of 10 units per acre. So if they do 4 units per acre, 20 units per acre in one plot, and they do 0 units per acre in the next one, obviously the 2 plots are 10 units per acre across both pieces. So there's that. Some additional changes, they asked for reduced setbacks on the side. So LDC requires 20-foot setbacks on the corners, and they asked for 15. This allows them to put houses a little bit closer together on the corner lots. And bring in roads closer and things like that to allow more building space, basically. Increase the impervious surface ratios. So for single-family homes, they want 55%. The single-family attached, which are the townhouses, things like that, they want 65%. And for multifamily, which is the apartments, they want 70%. Now, this is important because throughout Beverly Hills, DRI, everything that's been built out so far is roughly 50% impervious surface ratio, meaning 50% of it's covered in impervious surface, so concrete, parking lots, things like that. The other 50% is open, natural grass, sand, whatnot. This project wants to increase the concrete basically to 55% for the single family areas, 65% for the single family attached, and 70% for the multifamily. So this greatly increases what is impervious throughout the new section that they're building out throughout this Tuscany project versus what's already in place there in Beverly Hills. They want a reduction to 113 acres of recreational space, so they want to reduce how much recreational space they have to provide for that. And they want 89 acres of the BCO, which is like commercial office business areas. They want to increase that from 89 acres to 111 acres to allow them to put the lagoon in. So we had talked about the lagoon. The lagoon is allowed by right. It's allowed on a commercial property. However, they wanted to increase the amount of commercial property available because they didn't have enough space to put a lagoon in without reducing how much they can build in terms of buildings for commercial. So they wanted to increase the commercial acreage to allow them to put the lagoon in, but also keep the flexibility to add the same number of office units. I think they have like 300,000 square feet they can build. They wanted to keep that option open to build 300 square feet of commercial buildings. Plus, now they can do the lagoon in a separate area because they increased that. And then they may add a charter school. So I say they may because the development agreement talks about doing a charter school, but it says they're going to do their best to bring a charter school. They don't guarantee they're going to do it. So that's an optional thing as far as I'm concerned for that. Now we're going to talk about, we're going to see some back and forth with the commissioners. First we're going to start with Commissioner Kennard saying that why this is a great project and why we got all these concessions and how, this helps Citrus County go forward. And then we're going to hear Commissioner Finnegan counter that and saying it's not as great of a deal as it comes out on the surface.
The option, and I understand the board's hesitancy, but the option is if you approve this, the only thing we're giving them, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Joanna, the only thing we're giving them is the flexibility to move around these numbers. Same numbers, same lagoon or golf course, whatever, but we're granting them the flexibility. If we turn them down, we lose that 20 feet of right-of-way. We lose the shared DRA. We lose them building that one lane of road. we lose an awful lot. And that, it doesn't mean it just goes away. It means now it's on the backs of the taxpayers. Because we still have to widen 491, whether they build this under their DRI entitlements or they build it under, an approval from tonight. Either way, that road has to be widened. So it's either gonna cost them, they're either gonna cough up millions of dollars for it, what is it, $7-8 million, whatever that figure is, or the taxpayers are gonna pay a whole lot more than that through the eminent domain process. We just saw that on 491.
Well,
Now, important with that is that he's talking about mostly the 491 expansion. He's saying that they're giving us 50 foot of right of way to be able to expand 491 to 4 lanes. Now, that is true. They are giving 50 foot of right of way. However, a little bit of I don't want to say something that kind of missed the mark there is that he was incorrect in saying that the rest of it's going to be on like taxpayers. Yes, we have to pay some money to widen 491. They are required to put in 1 lane of 491. So as it is now, they're required to give 30 feet of right of way and build 1 lane of highway. Obviously, we can't do just 1 lane of highway, so we have to do 2. So the county would be on the hook for the other half. So that is true that the county taxpayers are paying for that. His argument was that if we don't get the additional 20 feet that they gave us, 20 feet for 100 or 1.4 miles, taxpayers are going to have to pay for it. So that is true. We have to pay for eminent domain, purchasing property, however that's going to end up working out. However, what he didn't mention was that we are giving them impact fee credits for that land. The original DRI, I don't believe, required them to get impact fee credits. It required them to build the road out with no impact fee credits. Maybe they were getting something from it, but I didn't see the impact fee credits in there for that. But now we're giving them impact fee credits to give us the additional road for that, rather than us doing eminent domain. So we're losing impact fees to get this road that they're going to have to widen anyway. So we can argue that the county's still paying for it. We're just getting it for quote unquote free up front, rather than paying for it through eminent domain. But in the back end, they're going to pay less in impact fees, so they're basically buying, or we're basically buying that anyway by doing that.
The option,
well, I didn't yield the floor yet. I will disagree with that, and I will have Joanna maybe put some clarification. Commissioner Kennard says that they're only asking for flexibility. In 2025, if they stick with the 1981 DRI, are they able to build 4,937 units?
They're
Joanna.
also asking flexibility in lot sizes and an impervious surface and in density to move it around. So he's partially right. They are asking for a lot of flexibility in where things go, but they're also asking for flexibility in impervious surface. And I think it would be hard to develop that many, meeting the current lot sizes in Beverly Hills. I think that's a pretty high number.
So my point being, without us giving a green light to the extra ISR and the flexibility and all of these things, they're not building the same number of units. They're asking for a lot more than what you're thinking that they're asking for.
Just to clarify, the DRI does require them to build 1 lane of road in that 30 feet they were supposed to give us in the DRI. I don't know how you build 1 lane of road and what purpose that would serve for the county, but they were obligated to build 1 lane of road.
So there you heard Commissioner Finnegan push back a little bit, saying that we're doing more than just give them flexibility to build what they want, where they want to do it. We're giving them the ability to build additional houses. As we mentioned earlier, Land Development Code dictates different things about house building, all those things. So they wouldn't be able to build what they want to build based on the current LDC. We have to give them permission, and that's what Commissioner Finnegan is saying, is that we're doing more for them to help them increase their revenues, and we're just getting the 1 lane, and we're calling the additional 20 feet, project progress.
Well,
So we heard the concession. So this is the second half of the meeting. Once staff got done, once open to the public got done, This is where the chaos ensued. This is where the board, for whatever reason, decided to sit down for an hour and a half and negotiate on the fly. This late at night, they had no idea what they're negotiating because when all said and done, they said, okay, well, we don't know what we agreed to. Let the attorneys go back and check the minutes and write down what it is that we agreed to, because they didn't know. So chaos, like I said. And again, they gave him that ability for an hour and a half to sweet talk them and say, hey, what about this? What about this? What about this? Introducing new arguments, introducing new evidence, introducing new things outside of the quasi-judicial procedures. So they're violating their ordinance by allowing this to happen. But they allowed it to happen. So let's see what the concessions it is that the county got in return for the extra 20 feet of right-of-way that we're getting and the ability for them to build this project. So there's 10 different things that we negotiated, 10 different things that were put into the minutes that the attorneys would go back later on, that again, nobody has any clue what's in this stuff because they didn't want to sit there and listen to them rattle off 10 in a row. So they're going to let the attorneys figure it out. They're going to sign it. They approved it. They don't know what's in it. So I'm going to tell you guys what's in it. Number one, prior to the issuance of the 301st certificate of occupancy for the residential units, applicant shall submit park trails green space master plan. Basically, the commissioners were concerned about a bunch of different colors. They had no plans in place for where anything was going. They couldn't visualize stuff because, again, they're not tied to a specific design. We're giving them flexibility to do whatever they want to. So they wanted some assurance that they'll be able to see something. So Rob came up with the idea of, once we do 300 houses, we'll go ahead and bring you a master plan of the trails, parks, and green space. And then he said initially for approval for the county. Same thing with number 2 and then number 3. They were for approval for the county. Our county attorney, Denise Lynn, questioned, well, what happens if they don't approve it? Rob didn't have an answer for that, so he scratched out the for approval portion of it and said, hey, so after 300 houses, we're going to bring back to you a master plan of all these things, and you guys can take a look at it. If you want to give us feedback, great. But importantly, they're not bound to do anything that the commission says. So if the commission says, hey, we don't like that trail, or, that doesn't make sense, they're like, okay, cool, thanks for the feedback, but we're going to do our own thing anyway. Because, again, there's no mechanism for them to have to approve this before they go forward with it for that. Number 2, along the similar lines, after the issuance of the 300 house, the applicant shall submit a phasing plan with amenities. So this is where they want to see the different amenities that are being provided, whether it's a lagoon, whether it's schools, some different things like that. So they wanted to see where those things are going. So they said that after the 300th house, they would bring back this master plan. But again, no input from the BOCC, just like, hey, here's the master plan, check it out. Same with number 3, applicant shall be obligated to provide an annual report or absorption plan. This was a requirement for the school board, so they have to provide this to the school board so the school board can start to figure out bus stops and things like that. So as developments are built, as the different sub areas are built out, the school would know, hey, we have to start getting bus routes there, or we have to plan for this many kids and all those things. So that will again be presented to the board as a report for those first 3 things. Number 4, this was already kind of in the project, but they guaranteed it, fiber optics throughout the project. Number 5 is street leaf lighting throughout the project, which is like LED street lights with solar panels, so they're not plugged into the grid as far as I know. The DRAs shall be designated to accommodate the expansion for 491 to 6 lanes. So there's drainage requirements in this. As they build 1 lane of highway, which is what they're obligated for, they have to provide some type of drainage for that. This expands that drainage. So they're giving us additional drainage space so that if we were to, in the future, expand 491 to 6 lanes, the drainage is already in place to accommodate the 6 lanes. So it's about an additional 4 acres of land, 3 acres of land, something like that, I think they said, that they were giving us, quote unquote, giving us for, again, impact fee credits for that expansion. Number 6, reclaim water for irrigation in common areas and golf course when available. This was a concern about the lagoon and things of that nature, the golf course, if they put a golf course in, because they might do a golf course instead of a lagoon. They said that they can't do reclaimed water for the lagoon. It's too expensive to run that through, so that would be fresh water that they would draw from there. But importantly, this says when it's available. Clark Stillwell got up and said that I think within the next 5 years, all of this is supposed to be online for reclaimed water. Maybe not. I don't know, but they'll say they'll use reclaimed water whenever it's available, whatever that is. Number 8 is no residential houses in the BCO town center districts. So as we saw on the map, the red districts that had the commercial space, they can't put residential developments in there. The original development agreement allowed them to do that. However, as they admitted, there's no reason to do that because then we lose the more valuable commercial space. So they would never even put the residential in there. But beside that point, that is now a concession that's on this list. Number 9, fire station negotiation guidelines determine how much they need to pay towards the new fire station. So we talked about how the DRI requires them to put a 2-bay station in. Fire services says we need more than a 2-bay station. It needs to be a 4-bay station. They're not obligated to do a 4-bay station. They're required to do a 2-bay. So what the agreement says now is that they'll get together. The developer will pay for a study, a consultant or whatever it is, to do a study to see how much it's going to cost for a 2-bay station. Then they're going to present that to the Citrus County and be like, hey, this is how much we think it's going to cost for a 2-bay station, and then double that for a 4-bay station. So the county can do the same thing, and the county can have a study come in, and then if the 2 studies are within 5%, the developer will pay for the most expensive option. If it's more than 5%, then they have to figure out a way to negotiate that. They talked about mediators and all those things. So number 9 is the guidelines of how all that's going to work and how the counties can get a 4-bay station basically at half price because of this option here. Number 10. So number 10 is the apartment buildings. This is where we talked about them going up to 4 units. Now, the original development agreement that they presented prior to this evening, before they discussed all of these concessions, allowed them to go to three stories. During the course of the night, the commissioners were like, we like more green space. We want more green space in this. If we allow you to go to 4 stories on some of these apartments, can you give us more green space? The developer absolutely wants 4 stories because that's more profitable for them. So he's like, yeah, sure. Rob's like, yep, we'll go ahead and do that. We'll agree to that. Now, importantly with this, the BOCC did not put any contingencies on this. They just said, you can go to 4 stories and, it would be nice to see more green space. So what can happen here with this amendment is it says amend the master plan to allow 4 stories in the MF1 and MS4 districts, amend the residential design standards to allow 20 units per acre. So as they go up, they have to increase density, obviously, because now they're adding more people, right? Now they have to keep the 10 units per acre across all of the multifamily areas. But importantly, this allows them the 4-story option. But it does not require them to give a number of green space back. So for instance, the board could have said, hey, for every 4-story building you build, you need to give us 2 acres of green space. That could have been the requirement. That could have been proposed. But instead, they're like, we would like to see more green space, so can you please help us with green space? But we'll give you 4-story apartment buildings. Hopefully you can help us with green space. Now, it's very likely that ends up happening because 20 units per acre, again, they have to keep 10 units across the whole project. However, they can reduce some of those 2- and 3-story buildings they had planned on doing down to 1-story units, and so they can keep the same groundwork of concrete, the same footprint, so to speak, of concrete, and not add any additional green space. So we just gave them the ability to go to 4 stories, which again, no building in Citrus County is 4 stories tall, so this is going to be the tallest buildings that are built in Citrus County. We gave them that ability, and we did not get any concessions for guaranteed green space in exchange. But we call this a win. We call this a concession. We say this is a much better thing than what we could have gotten if we didn't do anything. So I don't see how this helps Citrus County, whereas it helps the developer immensely because it allows them to build apartments for cheaper. Now that said, that's kind of where we're at with all of this. That is the gist of the project. Those are the things that Citrus County negotiated for this project. So we approved the project and we got those 10 contingencies as part of the project. And then we got additional 20 feet of right away. So an email I sent to them last night said basically we get 20 feet of right away for 1.4 miles that we have to pay for impact fee credits. And we get half of a 4-bay station, and we get maybe a school is the other thing. A couple things here or there. However, they get the ability to do 4-story buildings. They get the ability to increase the impervious surface ratio, so add more concrete on the ground. They get reduced green space areas, reduced recreation areas. They get to impact fee credits for the money that they were going to, or the land that they're going to provide that they had to provide anyway. So great deal for the developer. I'm not sure it's a great deal for Citrus County, but regardless, our commissioners voted for this project, and now we are stuck with it because this project is finalized. They do not have to come back to the BOCC for anything unless they request variances as they're building stuff out. So now we're stuck with this project. The board, I'm not sure, knows exactly what they voted for when they did this, but they, were eager to vote for that approval. I guess we'll see in 20 years what this ends up looking like. So hopefully, this is good. I will add to that note, the issue with PUDs, and this is what they've experienced with the 491-486 intersection, is the PUD gives the developer immense power to change things and to kind of do what they want, because the PUD is basically an outline of what they're doing. There's not any specifics in there. And so all night long we heard the commissioner say, there's no specifics, we don't know what you're doing, We saw with this before 491. Developers come in, show pretty pictures on the screen, show, all these things, hey, we're gonna do this, and this. They vote on a PUD, and then they get a product that isn't anything close to what they saw. Because again, the developers aren't tied to specific things in that PUD. Just because they show a pretty picture on the screen doesn't mean that's what you end up getting, because they're allowed changes and they're allowed immense control over what their final product is. So hopefully this isn't going to bite us in the butts later on. None of these commissioners are going to be here in 25 years as commissioners, maybe. I mean, who knows what happens. But I'm assuming none of the commissioners are going to be around 25 years as commissioners to see what this looks like. So this is basically their legacy as commissioners with this project. So hopefully it's not a horrible project. But I am not super positive on that based on the reputation of Metro in the other areas. So that's it for me. Enjoy the weekend. I will be back next week with some other stuff for you guys to dive into. All right, have a great weekend.